this concern for a while, and it is taking shape. And now that it's taking shape and I have data points for you, it's not speculation on my part. And that's very important here because sometimes I can see something's coming, but it hasn't happened yet. And some of you get mad at me and say I'm just screaming in the wind or nonsense, but it's actually is real. I am very, very concerned that the very online right risks damaging President Trump and causing controversy for him that he himself is not responsible for, but will be thrown in his direction and is a distraction. This is a problem that the left has dealt with. Where did all of the hyper-trans issues come from? It came from a very online group of left-wing progressive activists who essentially soaked into the Democratic ethos and drove them off a cliff. What started online bled offline into the minds of a very online left-wing progressive activist core and began polluting the thoughts of the Democratic Party. You can see it happening there. Go back to 2020. Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, when they lost their respective presidential primaries, the postmortems of both campaigns in multiple media outlets, there was a common theme. They were so in tune with what the online left was saying, doing, and the fight of the moment on Twitter that they couldn't relate to normies. They couldn't relate to normal people. And inevitably, the hyper online left and right think that they are normal. There's a guy, I want to leave his name out of it. Because I do like him, and it's not to smear him, but there's a young political activist who is very, very online. In fact, he's so online, it cost him a job when he started. Some of his online antics blew up in his face offline, didn't translate well with people. But after the election, on January 20th, he tweeted that this is proof that what happens on Twitter is the real world, and none of us need to go touch grass, and don't listen to people who say you need to touch grass. That's a dangerous warning sign for the people who are online and really do think what happens online is the real world. On TikTok, on social media, transgenderism is all the rage and everybody supports it. In the real world, they don't. The left went with transgenderism. It blew up in their face. On TikTok and social media, DEI and thinking the United States as a racist country plays very well with the online left. It plays very well with the MSNBC crowd. It does not play well with Black and Hispanic Americans who live in the real world. It's a problem. I have examples for you. Let's begin with what happened yesterday with Pam Bondi and Jeffrey Epstein. They invited, and by the way, you want an example of how online this whole thing is? They invited online social media influencers who not only were giddy to participate, but held up these binders of Jeffrey Epstein documents. The documents were all old news. All of them were old news. There was nothing new in the Jeffrey Epstein documents. And then Pam Bondi and Donald Trump's whole administration, including our new FBI director, Kash Patel, were attacked by people for a stunt. It was a stunt. It was a stunt that was embraced by a hyper online right. The hyper online right, in fact, the conspiracy theorists have thrown the Jeffrey Epstein stuff into popular culture. Now everybody knows about Epstein and everyone's convinced there's a list. Do you know if you actually trace back the supposed Jeffrey Epstein list, it actually originates from online sources. It's not actually anything in the world. Let me explain to you the redactions in the paperwork. The redactions were not redactions of the sex traffickers. The redactions were the name of the people who were abused. The redactions were the names of the victims. They redacted the victims, and yet Pam Bondi was attacked yesterday because she was covering up the names of the sex traffickers. No, it was the victims. Pam Bondi should have never participated in this. Why did she? Because too many people in Trump land listened to the hyper online right. Release the Epstein list. I'm going to tell you something you're not going to want to hear. There is no Jeffrey Epstein list, and there never has been. Do you know why? Because the millionaires and billionaires paid the women off to keep quiet. What we got was Jeffrey Epstein's phone book, which was released 10 years ago. You know who's in there? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but I guess we give him a pass because he hates seed oils and vaccines. We've made a big deal about Bill Gates being in there. We made a big deal about Bill Clinton. Should we not point out Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, is on the Epstein phone list? We don't have the victims. But we're not going to get the list, and it's not because there's a secret cabal. This is what happened yesterday, is this was a total dud. It was an embarrassment, and to save embarrassment, by the way, you had all these guys on social media who are hyper-online people whose entire personalities are defined by what they do online, all tweeting the same things. Pam Bondi is a hero, but the deep state is blocking the information. The deep state's not blocking the information. There is no information. To the extent there is some information, Ghislaine Maxwell's case is still making its way through the courts. They can't get that information because it would compromise that prosecution. To the extent they're blocking information, they're blocking the information because it's relevant to a pending court case. There is no conspiracy. But the people who are the hyper online right are convinced there's a deep state conspiracy as opposed to a pending court case on appeal to the Supreme Court that they can't jeopardize by releasing the information. But the fact that Pam Bondi fell for this because of hyper online voices demanding it and inviting the hyper online right to the White House to have a celebration of a release of redacted 10-year-old documents shows you that this is a danger for Donald Trump. It's a danger for him. He's not responsible. He's not involved, but the buck always stops with the president. Maybe not in your mind, but with the mind of the American public. He's got to take action. Actually, his Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, needs to step in here. And then there's Andrew Tate. Most of you, thank God, don't know who Andrew Tate is. I cannot play you the audio of Andrew Tate, but I have a 5-minute profanity-laced tirade of Andrew Tate talking about how he traffics women. He is accused of human trafficking, of rape. He's a known pornographer. He's a documented pornographer. He calls himself a pimp. He offers a PhD. He calls it the Andrew Tate PhD program. It's the Andrew Tate Pimps and Hoes degree, where he talks about how you start romancing a girl, and then you start building a sexual relationship with her, and then you get her comfortable being videotaped in the relationship, and then you set up a pornography account in her name on your phone using your credentials to verify it, and you start putting up the pictures, and then you reveal to her that you've been putting up her pictures and their sex acts, so she suddenly realizes that it's already out there and it's making money. She could probably make money, and then you lock her in a room and you make her perform sex acts. And if she tries to complain, you choke her and slap her, and she's going to know who's in charge, and you never let her leave the house. It's all there. That's Andrew Tate. He is a well-documented abuser of women and a pornographer. He's credibly accused of human trafficking. But you know what the hyper-online right is now saying? Actually, it's in Romania, and Romania is a corrupt country, and so he's just a victim of their corruption. The dude is literally, in his own words on video, bragging about how he beats up women and forces them into sex acts and videotapes it and keeps all the money and locks them up so they can't leave the house and run away with the money. I would play you the audio. It's available. You go online, look on my Twitter account. You can see it. I can't play it because it's profanity-laced. The Tampa Bay Young Republicans are inviting Andrew Tate to come hang out with them. They tweeted an invitation to Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan, who is involved with Tate's nefarious enterprises, to come speak to the group now that they've come to the United States. And why have they come to the United States? Because, again, not Donald Trump, who is unaware of the situation, but the people who work for Donald Trump, who are hyper online, arrange for the Romanians to consent for Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate to be allowed to come to the United States. Ron DeSantis is having none of it, by the way, very upset with the whole thing.
No involvement in that. I read about it through the media. Clearly, the federal government has jurisdiction, whether they want to rebuff his entry into the United States, and I have confidence that whether it's Pam Bondi or Kristi Noem, that they will be looking at that. I do know our Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, is looking at what state hooks and jurisdiction we may have to be able to deal with this. But the reality is no, Florida is not a place where you're welcome.
Andrew Tate is an credibly accused human trafficker with a massive list of victims. And it is this wild juxtaposition that the very same hyper online right who is demanding a list of Jeffrey Epstein celebrity clients and victims is wrapping their arms around Andrew Tate to the extent that the Tampa Bay Young Republicans are willing to invite this pornographer, abuser of women, and accused human trafficker to come hang out with them. The Justice Department liaison between the Justice Department and Donald Trump in the White House is a young guy who's a big Andrew Tate fan, had his picture taken with Andrew Tate, has refused to believe the allegations about Andrew Tate. You don't have to believe the allegations about Andrew Tate. He's actually on camera bragging about it. The House Republican Judiciary Committee yesterday, after the Epstein files turned out to be a dud, tweeted out a link and said, here are the real Jeffrey Epstein files. It was the Rick Astley song, or they Rickrolled people. They decided to use the official account of the House Judiciary Committee's Republicans to do a joke about sexual human trafficking victims and to make it a funny. Guys, most people don't live in the real world, don't live online. They don't live online. They don't live on Twitter. Twitter has massive numbers, but everybody knows they're inflated. Most people aren't regularly on Twitter, but these people are. And they see all this stuff on Twitter and they think it's normal. They think it's in the real world. They think the real world is Twitter. What happens on Twitter is the real world, and they're going to damage Donald Trump. They're willing to make excuses for one human trafficker while they attack another. They're willing to do a dog and pony show of a release of information about human trafficking victims and participants when it's old news, it's not new stuff. And then they have to concoct a conspiracy theory that the deep state is hiding the documents from us. That's what's happened. It was them. It wasn't us. Don't blame us. Why the hell did Pam Bondi go through with the dog and pony show if the deep state was hiding the documents? It makes Donald Trump look bad because these are his people. It provides openings for the left. And then there's USAID. They dismissed workers yesterday. Do you know what some of the hyper online right people did, the Laura Loomers of the world? And like, they stood outside USAID when these employees who were fired and let go came out and left with their boxes, and they cheered and they applauded. You may like that USAID workers were let go, but if you don't understand how bad it looks to normal Americans when you're standing outside cheering on people who just lost their job and laughing at them, you need to touch some grass too. These people need to touch some grass. It doesn't come across well, but it's not just that. It risks everything for Donald Trump because it blows back on him. He had nothing to do with it, but the people in his immediate orbit did. And because of that, it's going to come back to him. And it's going to cause new attacks from the media at a time he's winning. He's winning. And this risks throwing everything off its game, throwing him off his game, throwing the White House off its game. And he had nothing to do with it, but the people in his orbit who are desperately addicted to Twitter and think what happens on Twitter matters most, they're going to sabotage everything. They're going to make Trump and his entire team look cold, cruel, callous, and on the side of a pornographer, human trafficker. Something needs to happen. Somebody needs to step in. It probably needs to be Elon Musk because they all listen to him. But I'm afraid Musk is too roped in on Twitter as well. Somebody's got to take action before this blows back on the president.